The focus of this episode is actually going to be to celebrate and to talk about the 10-year anniversary that I have coming up as an entrepreneur in business, but through the lens of my 10 biggest failures. Because who actually wants to hear about all of the wins? Boring. We actually want to hear about the messiness behind the brand, behind the person. We want to hear the real stuff. Hello and welcome back to the Soulful CEO Path, the podcast for ambitious soul-led entrepreneurs who are building wildly abundant and aligned businesses that create ripple effects of positivity in the world. And if you are joining me in a video version of this, you're going to see that there are moving boxes in the background. You might even catch a glimpse of these disgusting nails that need some help. And you might wonder what the hell is going on, because I almost didn't do this podcast because my world is in disarray right now. We are just about to move at the beginning of January. We're heading off for a 2-week vacation in Mexico in just a few days. It's my birthday coming up. It's December. It's the end of the month, and there's a lot going on. And I thought, rather than not doing this podcast because I really want to do this episode, I thought, actually, how perfect is it that this is so imperfect? Because the focus of this episode is actually going to be to celebrate and to talk about the 10-year anniversary that I have coming up as an entrepreneur in business, but through the lens of my 10 biggest failures. Because who actually wants to hear about all of the wins? Boring. We actually want to hear about the messiness behind the brand, behind the person. We want to hear the real stuff. And so that's what I am committed to sharing with you all today in celebration of the 10-year anniversary of entrepreneurship. And I don't know how many of you have been here from the beginning, but if you have, you'll know that my journey has been anything but linear. There have been multiple iterations of the business. In fact, 4. So when I first started my business, it was called Winning Defined by You, Coaching, Consulting, and Facilitation, because I had no idea what I was doing. And so I just kind of put it all in there. And, if we cover it all, then you can't say that you don't do something. And then there was Winning Academy. And then there was just my personal brand, Kristin Constable. And then there's Soulful CEO, which it is now. So you would have seen the evolution. And so I want to bring you, I did some reflecting on this, and this was actually a really fun process around some of the biggest failures that I've had in the last 10 years to, just show you that this entrepreneurial journey is a wild ride, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. But it has had its ups and its downs for sure. And this is going to be a really fun way to end and close out Season 2 of the Soulful CEO Path. We've had some incredible guests on here this year, and I've had so much fun hosting this space. And in 2023 with Season 3, I have some really exciting new, I guess we could call them templates for the episodes. So there's going to be a variety of different templates that I'm going to use to create the episodes, which is going to keep it fresh and fun. And I'm really excited for that. So before we wrap the year and go into holiday season and, and this kind of next chapter here, hopefully when I come on here next time, if you're watching video, you're going to see the new podcast studio I have set up, and it's going to look really good and polished. And I think it's actually just so fun that there's this juxtaposition around what's going on here and then what is going to show up on the other side. So you can see that there is these polarities and both things exist, and it's totally okay. So let's start. I'm going to take you back to year 1 in my business. And when I started, I didn't have savings. I left my corporate job, which was a 6-figure corporate job. And I did have savings. I just didn't have anything lined up. So it was actually a bit of savings and then a line of credit. And I kind of had, based on that, a 6-month runway where I was like, okay, I'm going to give this 6 months and see if I can make it work. Well, turns out that in the first year of business, it wasn't necessarily that I couldn't get business that was going to be the problem. I hit 6 figures in my first year, which I was very proud of. But I did it in a way that completely burned me out. I was the worst boss that I ever had. Now, there's some people with entrepreneurship, it's just never going to be for them because they're like not super motivated intrinsically. They kind of need the, like, you got to show up here at 5, you have these deadlines in order to motivate them. For me and for many of the women that I work with, as like A-type, highly ambitious women, that's actually not the problem. The problem is we drive ourselves too hard. We don't give ourselves breaks. I actually was just having this conversation with the women inside of Legacy Builders, because now what I do is I implement actual time off, like over these holidays and out of office is going on. There's no calls, there's no telegram. And I encourage the women in my world to do the same, because the type of woman that I am and the type of women that I work with, we actually drive ourselves too hard. Creating and learning how to create balance is really important. And there are seasons for growth, and there are seasons for, working long hours and doing what it takes to make it work, especially in that first year of business. I don't think I could have created those results that I wanted to create and did create if I was like, oh, I'm going to go like have a 3-hour morning routine, and then I'm going to work for a couple hours in the afternoon, and then I'm going to go walk the dog. Like, it wouldn't have happened in that time frame. However, there is this need to be able to regulate and understand how to redline and then how to create space to rejuvenate. And so that's something that I had to really learn, and I had to learn how to be an entrepreneur, because in my corporate life, I kind of had these self-imposed boundaries. So it's like everyone leaves the office around like 6 p.m. at the latest. Yeah, maybe you might do a little bit of work on evenings and weekends, but it's not expected to, for the most part, unless something big was coming up. But in my business, there was none of those boundaries. I'd wake up, I'd be thinking about work and doing work. I'd go to sleep, I was thinking about the same thing. I would like work weekends. I would pack my calendar with like 8 coaching calls a day. Like, it was insane. And so in that first year, that was a really great learning lesson, a big failure, but also learning lesson that I had to do things differently. All right. So the other thing that happened after that first year in business was that, as I said, I named my business. I just kind of was like, okay, this sounds good. Winning Defined by You Coaching, Consulting, Facilitation. But I realized that that wasn't really going to cut it. And so I transitioned to a name. Winning Academy was the name that I decided to go with after realizing that first name and brand was a little hard to remember, didn't really clearly share what I was up to. But I didn't understand how SEO worked. I didn't understand really any of the online space at all at that point. So after that first year, when I changed the brand, I deleted my domain. I kind of deleted all my accounts, and all of the work that I put in that first year in business to, build up some of that, like SEO and searchability and even like my social accounts, I just threw it all away. And in retrospect, it was such a shame that I didn't understand how that worked, because I had done a lot of work in that first year with YouTube and guest writing in the Forbes Coaches Council. And now even like sometimes the backlink for the Forbes Coaches Council, this is years ago now, but it's all linked to that domain, and I just deleted it. I'll get bounce backs or people reaching out being like, hey, like I can't access this thing. And I'm like, yeah, like, because I just completely didn't ask the right questions. I didn't know what questions to ask. And I just kind of like flushed a whole year of like really intentional work down the toilet because of that. The third thing that happened in the journey that I would consider, this one's interesting because it's a failure in some ways, but also it was such a good experience in others. So I was about 2 years now into the business, and I was reaching my capacity limit. So business was going well, but it was, I had recovered from my burnout in the first year, but it was still feeling kind of like not manageable. And I was doing everything myself. And there was a woman that I knew that was incredible, and she worked in the same kind of like learning and development space as me. We had a relationship, and it was, a partnership that I was like, this could really work. Like if her and I partnered in business, this could really work. And so we actually did. And we partnered and we became business partners, and we did some incredible work with some incredible companies over the course of 2 years. And, that part of the whole thing was like such a win and such a good experience. However, one of the things that, I just didn't know going into business partnership with somebody was how that was going to feel for me and what that actually meant and what that looked like. So, I had a really clear vision for where I wanted to take my work and, what kind of work I wanted to do. And, obviously when you have a business partner, their vision and their desires is part of that too. And partly, through the lived experience of it, I started to recognize that I wanted to take my work in a different direction. I actually didn't want to stay in the corporate space, and I didn't want to continue to do these like rinse and repeat programs with these companies that I started to feel like I had just created myself another job, because I was essentially doing the same thing that I was doing when I had my corporate job. I just had a business or my own business around it. So it was great because I was making more money essentially doing it, but I was like, I've just kind of created myself another job, and that's not where I wanted to take my business. So I had to have this conversation with my business partner, and it was late 2019, and it was right during the same time that my ex-husband and I were going through a divorce. So it was around, it was like the fall of 2019. And I just felt like everything was just ending. It was, my business was ending. we closed the consultancy down. My relationship was ending. And I moved to this little island called Bowen Island off the coast of Vancouver, a 20-minute ferry ride. And I just remember being there. I had rented a garden suite from a friend, and I was like, wow, okay, this is what it feels like to be fully, like, metaphorically naked. Like, everything that I identified with, being like in this relationship, in this partnership, being a stepmother, being a business owner of this consultancy, it's just overnight was all gone. And looking back on it, it was such a powerful pivot point for me, because it's when I really stepped into the online coaching space. And that's when I really stepped into my personal brand and stepped into the work that I was really here to do. But it took what you could see as a failure of a shutting down of a company, a failure of a business partnership, to kind of get to that point. So that was a big thing in the journey. And then after that, partly because if I look at it objectively, the fourth big failure I would say at that point is I spent way too long holding on to too many things. So once I closed down the leadership development consultancy, I still had resistance letting all of that work go. It was really, really interesting to me to notice how much of my identity was tied up in that kind of work, working with these big notable brands, and having it almost be like an ego boost, or it was like a very egoic thing around having these types of partners. And when I let that go and let it go on paper, it took me a while to fully let that work go. I still had contracts behind the scenes that I would take on. If people reached out and asked, would you be willing to do this workshop? I would say yes. And for probably a year and a half, I held on to way too many things. Actually, it's probably more like 2 years, because now we're into 2020, there's COVID, there's all of this. And now I'm just holding corporate workshops. I remember doing a bunch of online corporate workshops during COVID. Everyone's cameras would be turned off because no one wanted to be on Zoom, but the companies were like, we want to bring everyone together like once a month to do these things. And it was just like so soul sucking, but I held on to that. I held on to partnership projects. I was doing a really big partnership project with one of the leaders in the coaching industry, and we built her coaching certification program, which was incredible. But I was doing that as well as coaching one-on-one, and I started a group coaching program called Activate at that time. So again, was holding like all of these things in this pattern of doing so many things and going wide, not deep, really confronted me in that stage of my business. And so what ended up happening was actually because of that, 2023 was the first year. So I started my business in 2016, and then 2023 was the first year where there was a revenue contraction. Up until that point, it had been slow growth every single year, or like sustainable growth, I guess you could call it, every single year. And then 2023 was actually an income dip. And I look back on that and I think about why that happened, and I can contribute it to the fact that I was holding too many things. My energy was spread way too thin, and I didn't go deep on enough things. I was trying to go wide. And, part of that failure, which is failure number 5 on the list, is like, it wasn't just the contraction that was the problem, because ideally you want growth year over year. But I probably could have been, okay with that maybe, if I had kept an eye on my expenses a little bit tighter. So the revenue contracted, but I didn't adjust for my expenses, which, weren't huge, but things like I had an assistant, assistant at the time. I was doing some ads, some like video production stuff. And I ended up with a year that, if revenue goes down, okay, that's like not great. But if profit, right, it goes down, that's really not good. And then I was at a negative profit for that year. And that was like a real big, like, oh shit kind of moment. So that was 2023. Now, this is like over the course of many years. This isn't just from 2024 onwards, but when I was thinking about some of the other big failures that I've had, I wanted to share these ones because I think they're relatable, and I just want to normalize the fact that, sometimes we make investments in our business that don't pay off, and it happens, and we have to just move on from them. And certain ones, like I'm going to share with you, it's taken me too long to move on from them. And so the first one was my first foray into Facebook ads. So I remember I had my group coaching program Activate, and I was working with a coach at the time, and I didn't know any better at that time. I would, just as I said, kind of transitioned from the corporate leadership development space where like my online stuff was like a website and some posts, but I wasn't selling or getting sales that way. I was selling through sales conversations. I was selling through relationships, like base sales. So this was the first time that I was going to be selling online, taking a lead from a stranger into a happy paying customer. And I was working with this coach at the time, and I obviously didn't know better. And I'm a big believer in like, if you're going to invest in someone, is like work with them within their system, learn what you can, and you might make mistakes, but at least you tried it on as prescribed. So she's like, well, you have to create a sales page. So I'm like, okay, I'll create a sales page. How do I do that? So I got I still use the software, FG Funnels. I like it. It's kind of complex, but I've been using it for years. It works. But she's like, you have to create a sales page in there. I'm not a designer. I don't know how to do that. So she's like, okay, I can put you in touch with someone who can create that for you. It's a $5,000 investment. Now I know that that is absolutely not necessary. That is not a good use of money, especially when you're pre-revenue on an offer. But I didn't know. So I was like, okay, well, this is what it's going to take to get people like inside of my offer. I'll invest that money. So I invested $5,000. Then we had to solve the problem of getting leads. So it's like, okay, you should invest in Facebook ads. So I invested in Facebook ads. I started working with, someone who, now reflecting back on it, they didn't have any experience in the coaching space. They were very successful at running ads for commerce companies, which is very different than service-based companies, coaching companies. I know that now. I did not know that then. I ended up spending $8,500 over the course of 3 months with them with zero ROI on that spend. Zero. So that launch in itself was like a $13,500 investment that actually had zero ROI. And it was really demoralizing, to be honest, because I kind of had this expectation that if I just did all the right things, I'm using air quotes, that I would be successful with that launch. And it didn't turn out that way. I do think I had some people join. Yeah, I definitely had. I think it was a group of like 4 or 5, if my memory is serving me correctly. So I did have, some people in that group, but it was like, yeah, it didn't come through ads. It definitely didn't come through ads. I did like a live launch for it, and it just, the expectation I had around that and what I ended up creating was my first kind of like reality check of like, oh shit, this is going to be harder than I thought, or more complex than I thought. So, that I just want to share, because it's like, yeah, what I've learned is that it is not as easy as people make it out to be, of like, oh, you just flip on ads, or you just create solid messaging on your sales page and all these leads are going to flood in. It is an ongoing iteration. It is a commitment to the refinement of the process. I ended up running Activate for over 2 years, multi 6 figures in terms of revenue through that stream. Actually, I don't know if it's multi, I was probably just under the multi 6-figure mark in that revenue stream. And it was an amazing program. And I still have people who, will respond, like send me messages saying like, that program like changed the trajectory for me. Like, I learned how to be an entrepreneur in that program, set me up with the business foundations that I needed to run my coaching and consulting business. And so it was such a worthwhile offer to do, but it didn't happen overnight. It took 2 years of refinement. And then I got to the place where I was like, I've actually outgrown this offer. I don't want to be having these conversations, for the next 5 years. So what's next? And that was like a really big insight that, it gets easier. It's gotten easier. And I now invest in ads and I, create sales pages, but I now have so much more context for that work. And it came through like hard lived experience. Okay. Number 7 on the list is around team management. And I'm going to combine number 7 and 8 here. And when I started my business, I came from having leadership experience in corporate. I ran teams. My first, kind of experience in a job, like a real job, was I ran operations for a restaurant group where I would be responsible for leading 20, 30 people, entire restaurants in terms of like team leadership. So I wasn't new to team leadership. I know how to delegate and communicate and set expectations and have, performance conversations and all of those things. But it was a different ball game doing it for myself as a small business versus leading in these big organizations. One, the talent is different when you have a budget you're working with and you're not a big brand that's able to attract necessarily top talent. So you're working with people who, may not be like experts at what they do when you're first starting, because truthfully is like, there's times like when my first assistant is like, not my first one, but the assistant that I'm thinking about is like, I didn't have the budget to be paying 6 figures to somebody to help me in an ops role at that point. So I'm doing the best I can with the resources I have, but it's going to be a different level of person than say when I was working in corporate. It would be like, okay, we're going to find like the best person for this role. Or even when I was operating restaurants, it was like all performance based. And so we got to reward based on someone's performance. Like obviously they had their like hourly rate too, but they got like better sections or they got better shifts depending on their performance. So there was an element of like incentivizing people that way. And when I, first started bringing on support, I kind of expected, I guess, or I had an expectation that I just give people like a solid role description and accountabilities, and we'd have our check-in calls and they would just like do the job. And that is not always the case. And I have, I've hired so many people over the last 10 years that some of them have been absolutely incredible. One of my first assistants, Sharon, I just love that woman to death. And she, really helped at the beginning of the business. I've hired some really great people. So this is not about saying like everyone I've worked with is not good, but I've had some people along the way that have like, because of my own leadership and my gaps in my leadership have negatively impacted the business. Like as an example, because we're being fully transparent here, I wasn't keeping track of one of my team members, her submitting her invoices, and that's on me. So like I didn't know that she hadn't submitted an invoice for 3 months. And then I get this like 10K invoice and I haven't budgeted for that. But that's like, it's a little bit like on her, like she should have been submitting every month, but it's more on me as the business owner, not having an eye on my financials and, and cash flow to not even recognize that. So those are the kinds of things in terms of my own leadership and team that I've had to really learn. This year in particular, this was number 8 that I'm kind of combining, is I got really excited about bringing on a new team member. I was like, okay, this is where, I'm going to talk about this in a minute, but time and capacity is my current bottleneck. So I'm like, I'm going to bring this person on. It's going to change the game. Did like my due diligence in terms of hiring and interviewing and setting them up on the in the interview. It's like, are you willing and able to manage my team? Because my VA, and the client experience is what I asked this person. And they're like, yeah, of course. Like, and they come on, we had a 3-month trial period. And it turns out that they weren't really into that. They didn't actually want to do that. They wanted to implement systems and work in their process, but didn't actually want to do the things that I needed them to do in the business. And so, what I had to do there was I had to let them go after 2 months of the 3 months that we were going to be working together. And the impact of that was really negative because I had all these half-baked systems that truthfully, I'm still figuring out. Some of them I'm like, oh, that's broken. That's not working. So, yes, failure. And 2, it's like just such a interesting thing to come back into looking at where are the gaps in my own leadership? Because, there are obviously fit issues, but I always want to look at it from, how did I let that happen? Where could have I communicated better, or where could we have caught this earlier so it didn't turn into something that had this negative effect both on the systems in my business, but also on clients, because there's some like mess ups with their billing and things like that. And the team leadership piece has been something that I have had to work on and I'm still working on. And I know that getting the right people to support is going to be the unlock for my next level. And, I continue to be hopeful and optimistic that I can get these right people in these right roles to support with things that are needed to grow the business, because I know that I can't take the business where I want it to go if I continue to operate as this like solopreneur with a VA like kind of support. Is like, I have a bigger vision for this company, and we can do quite a lot with a lean team. We don't need a big team, but we do need some like solid players to support in bringing the vision to life. So know that that's still a growth edge for me that I'm working on, and in 2026 I plan on making some really good headway there. Okay, I got 2 more for us here. Oh yeah, these ones are good ones. So 2025, I came into 2025 and my theme for the year was to do less better. And I had this pull. I read, oh my gosh, what's the Essentialism, the book. And I had read that book, Essentialism. I got gifted it by one of my clients in the summer of 2024. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is speaking to me, like doing less better, minimalist approach. And so I came into 2025 with that intention. It did not go that way. Like, spoiler alert, it did not go that way. And it's okay, but I kind of lost the plot. Like, I looked at I usually do monthly goals inside of my business, for my life, really. Every month I do a month-end review and goals for the next month and look at, all my KPIs and metrics and like what's working and what's not. And inside of my reminders on my app, the last time I did that was in September. This final quarter has like been a runaway train for me. And I want to share that because it's about progress, not perfection. And I do believe that sometimes we have a plan and things don't go to plan. And it's about getting back, onto that plan as soon as we can, or like to make the revisions needed. So in 2026, we're going to have a redo year of doing less better. I think so many of us right now are like craving simplification, right? And I think that this is a result of so much stimulus that we're getting in our worlds, whether it be through social media, the expectations of like how much we need to be on there and how much we need to be posting. And I know for myself, it's like just even all the different platforms that there's like email and Telegram and social or Instagram and then LinkedIn. And there's so much going on that it can feel very overwhelming. So next year, the goal is to really put everything through the filter of how can we optimize this to simplify it the most. So we're not launching a million different things. We're not doing a million different things. We're doing a few things really well. And that is going to be the discipline. I'm an Enneagram 7. If you guys know about Enneagram 7s love variety. They love newness. They love new things. And so it's going to be like actually a discipline for me to be like, this is what I'm saying I'm going to focus on and just doing that. And this year was kind of interesting because I started working with a new mentor in April. And part of our mentorship was she's really great at creative sales strategies. And so these different things that I tried over this past year and all of these different like micro offers and sales approaches and different strategies, they actually worked. Like this is my best revenue year to date. 2025 is going to be the best revenue year I've had to date. And, the approaches that I've used really did work. However, I'm noticing that there needs to be a correction on what I do in 2026, because this year, although it was a great revenue year, clients got great results, I worked with amazing women, it didn't feel always how I wanted it to feel. There was, too much busyness. There's a bit of like franticness, and I don't like operating like that. So this year is going to be about simplification, or 2026 is going to be about simplification, doing less better and optimizing, because I know that I'm a firm believer is like simple scales, complex fails. And so I need to take my own medicine there and be like, okay, that's what you know that that's what works. You know that your system, talking about me, my system, prefers more simplicity. Like some people can like sell multiple things at once, be doing a million different things, flying all over the place. Like my system does not enjoy that. Like I like to have clarity and focus on what I'm doing. And I like to put out really good work, and I like to go deep on things. And so I need to create the systems and the structure and the business model around that works. So that's the plan for 2026, redo year, around doing less better. We're going to give it another go, and it's okay, right? It's okay to have years like that where it's like, oh, okay, we need another run at that. Now, the final thing I want to share around my 10 failures in 10 years is a big one. And this one came to light, again, working with this mentor that I've been working with earlier in the spring. And it was that I forgot the weight of my experience and the gifts and the skills and the credentials and the life experience that I bring to the work. When I shut down my leadership development consultancy, I kind of like left all of that in the past. I didn't see how my 20 years now of, well, almost 20 and be 19 years of leadership experience, running operations for multi-million-dollar organizations, going across North America, training locations to like get started. So if they were opening up a new restaurant, I would go to that region. I would train the leaders and the managers and how we would run the training programs that I developed. Like when I think about all of the things that I bring to the work that I do today and helping people codify their brilliance, package it into scalable offers that create deep transformation for their clients that are positioned to sell. It's like this didn't happen in this little silo. I didn't just like wake up and be like, this is what I want to do. It's the combination of 20 years of experience being in operations, running businesses, then having my own leadership development consultancy, and then learning about going online and figuring out through trial and error everything there. And now working with some of the like biggest leaders in the space in multiple different industries. And I just forgot. I was just like treating that like that was normal. And I remember talking to my mentor and being like, I'm kind of irritated with myself. I'm kind of like annoyed that I just kind of like lost the plot here. And so I would say, that's why I left this one to last, this remembering of how what I've done in my life and every single breadcrumb that's led me to here, the last 10 years in business, all of the learning lessons, all of the things I've tried, all of these failures that I'm sharing with you, is that they are really it adds weight to what the work that I do in the world. And I need to share more of those stories, and I need to share more about like the how I think about things and how I got to sharing these frameworks that I do, or, how I help people with transformation, because it isn't just something I read in one book or got from one weekend seminar or something like that, or with one mentor. It is literally decades of experience. And so that one's a really important one for me to remember. And I do see that one as a failure. The forgetting is a failure, because it's like, oh my gosh, how did you forget that? How did you forget? Like if that was someone else, if it wasn't me, I'd be like, oh my gosh, like you have lost touch with what makes you so incredible. And so I wanted to leave that one for last, because I wanted to just allow you to sit with that as you're listening. And I want you to just check in, and you may have not forgotten, and you may have been like, you may be like way ahead of me on this one. But if you have forgotten, if you have lost touch with everything that you're bringing to the table, your years, your decades of experience, the life lessons, the failures, like all of that, and if you've lost touch with why that's so important and how that's so valuable to the people that you get to work with, my invitation for you is to like come back into remembrance. And one of the exercises that I did and I still have it on my phone and I look at it often, is I created something called a brag list. And this brag list, I like went back as far as I could go. And I wrote down everything that like is braggable, like all of the things, like including the failures, like including the fact that, I got married in Peru on the top of a mountain by a shaman. Like, I'm proud of that. Even though the relationship did not work and that we ended up getting a divorce, I'm proud that I had that experience. I'm proud that I did something that is like so out of the box that allowed me to create this really cool experience like a different culture, experience this like plant medicine in this beautiful way. And like, that's part of my journey. That's part of my story. And so that's a really fun little exercise you can do to end this year if you haven't done that already. Create a brag list for yourself and really sit with that and just recognize yourself for all the incredible things that you bring to your work and to the people that you get to work with. And just remember that those are the things that make you unique, that no one else can replicate. So thanks for joining me in this year-end wrap to season 3 and this special episode, which is a celebration of 10 years in business. Kind of wild. I've been thinking about what am I going to do to celebrate? But with everything that's going on, moving, buying the house, it's going to have to be something that's not super extravagant right now, but really deeply meaningful. And I just want to thank you all for being here, listening to this episode, but being in this community, being part of the journey. I so appreciate you. So have a wonderful end to 2025, and we'll be back here in 2026 with season 3. And as I said, a bunch of new formats, which I'm really looking forward to. So next time you see me, I'll be in a podcast studio in my home, which is going to be so cool. And I'm really looking forward to the guests that we bring on and the conversations that we have next year. All right, until then, see you soon.